The rain had been falling since morning, turning the streets gray and heavy with puddles. Cars splashed water as they passed, and people hurried under umbrellas trying not to get wet. At the corner of the main street stood a small but elegant cafe with warm lights glowing through its windows. Inside, the smell of fresh coffee and baked bread filled the air. The sound of soft jazz played in the background, blending with the low chatter of customers who had come to escape the gloomy weather outside. In one corner of the cafe sat a glossy black piano. It was more decoration than entertainment these days, used only on weekends when the cafe hired a local musician. Most of the time it sat quietly, polished and untouched, catching the reflections of the soft yellow lights. That afternoon, the cafe was busy. Businessmen scrolled through their phones, students typed on laptops, and a few elderly regulars sipped tea by the window. The owner, a man in his 50s, stood behind the counter checking the cash register. Everything was ordinary, until the door opened with a sharp sound of wind and rain. Everyone looked up. A young woman stepped inside. She was thin and pale, her hair messy and wet from the rain. Her jacket was old and faded, the sleeves a little torn. She carried no bag, no umbrella, just a small folded piece of paper in her hand. Her shoes made soft squishing sounds as she walked in. She looked around slowly as if unsure she was welcome. The barista behind the counter frowned. "Can I help you?" he asked, his tone polite but cold. The young woman hesitated. Her voice was soft and slightly trembling when she finally spoke. "Sir, I'm sorry to disturb. I just wanted to ask, could I play your piano? Just for a meal?" A few customers exchanged looks. Someone at a nearby table snorted quietly. The barista raised his eyebrows. "Play the piano?
For a meal?"
"Yes," she said, her eyes lowered. "I don't want money. Just something to eat. I can play, I promise." The room fell silent for a moment. Then, as if on cue, a few people laughed under their breath. One young man whispered to his friend, "She probably knows 2 notes." Another woman muttered, "These street people will say anything these days." The owner came out from behind the counter, wiping his hands on a towel. "What's going on here?" he asked. The barista shrugged. "She wants to play the piano for food." The owner looked at the woman carefully. She looked tired, no more than tired. There was a kind of sadness in her eyes that only comes from long days of being ignored. Still, this was a respectable cafe. Letting a stranger in off the street could make customers uncomfortable. "I'm sorry," he said. "This isn't that kind of place." "We can't just let anyone—" "Please," she interrupted quietly. "Just one song. If you don't like it, I'll leave. But if you do, maybe just a small meal. I haven't eaten since yesterday." Her voice wasn't begging exactly, but there was a kind of honesty in it that made a few people stop whispering. The owner sighed. The cafe had a reputation to keep, but something about her, maybe the quiet desperation in her tone, made him hesitate. "Fine," he said at last. "One song, but if you break anything, you'll be washing dishes, not getting food." A ripple of laughter went through the room again. The young woman didn't react. She simply nodded, wiped her hands on her wet jacket, and slowly walked toward the piano. The cafe grew quieter. Even those who had laughed earlier leaned forward a little, curious now. She sat down carefully, her fingers hovering above the keys. For a moment she didn't move. She seemed lost in thought, maybe trying to remember something, or maybe just taking a deep breath. Her hands looked small and fragile, the nails short and uneven. No one expected much. The barista crossed his arms, whispering to another staff member, "This will be painful." A couple by the window smirked, ready to be amused. The rain tapped softly on the glass as everyone waited. Then she pressed the first key. It was just one note, soft and pure, like a drop of water falling into a still pond. Then another note and another, forming a slow, tender rhythm. Within seconds, the sound changed. The music began to grow, weaving gentle chords that seemed to fill every corner of the cafe. People stopped talking. Even the espresso machine hissed quietly in the background as if it too was listening. Her fingers moved with calm confidence now, flowing across the piano like a small stream over stones. The melody was sad but beautiful, full of emotion. It was not the clumsy playing of a beginner. Every note carried a story. The customers who had laughed earlier now stared in silence. The owner, standing behind the counter, felt something tighten in his chest. He had heard many musicians play that piano, but none had made it sound like this. There was something alive in the way she played, something raw and honest. The young woman closed her eyes as she played. She wasn't performing for applause. It was as if she was somewhere else entirely, someplace far away, remembering something painful yet precious. Her expression softened. A faint smile appeared, and for a moment the exhaustion on her face disappeared. Outside, the rain continued to fall, but inside, time seemed to stop. When the final note faded into silence, no one moved. The sound lingered in the air for a few long seconds. Then someone clapped. Another joined. Within moments, the entire cafe was filled with applause. The same people who had mocked her were now cheering. The woman looked startled, as if she hadn't expected that reaction. She stood slowly and gave a small nod. "Thank you," she whispered. The owner came forward, his eyes still wide. "Miss, where did you learn to play like that?" he asked. She hesitated. "Just life," she said simply. The barista who had laughed before now looked embarrassed. "Would you like something to eat?" he asked quietly. She smiled softly. "If it's not too much trouble." "Not at all," the owner said quickly. "Please sit. You've earned it." He went to the kitchen himself and returned with a warm plate of food, a sandwich, a bowl of soup, and a cup of tea. The woman thanked him softly before eating. Her hands trembled a little as she lifted the spoon. Around her, people were still whispering, but this time their voices were filled with amazement, not mockery. "Did you hear that?" one man said. "She's incredible," another nodded. "I can't believe she's just out there on the streets." A few customers took out their phones, still stunned by what they'd witnessed. But the woman didn't seem to notice. She ate quietly, focusing on each bite as if she hadn't tasted warm food in a long time. The rain had begun to slow outside. The cafe felt different now, softer, warmer somehow. The piano still seemed to hum faintly from the power of her playing. When she finished her meal, she stood up and thanked the owner again. "You've been kind," she said. He shook his head. "No. You reminded us what real music sounds like." She smiled faintly, her eyes glistening. "Music is all I have," she said. And with that, she walked out into the quiet, wet street, leaving behind only the faint smell of rain and the memory of her song. For a long time, no one spoke. The owner looked at the piano, then at the door. "Who was she?" someone asked. No one knew. But everyone who had been there that day would remember the girl who walked in from the rain and played, not for fame or applause, but just for a meal. Outside, the sky was clearing and a soft light broke through the clouds. Somewhere in the distance, maybe blocks away, the sound of faint humming could be heard, like someone carrying the last echo of a song that had touched every soul in that little cafe. The rain had stopped completely by the next morning, leaving the street smelling of wet earth and coffee grounds. The cafe owner arrived early to open the shop, still thinking about the girl from the night before. He had seen many people come and go through his doors, artists, workers, students, but no one had played the piano like that. Her music still echoed faintly in his mind, like a dream that wouldn't fade. He wiped the counter, turned on the lights, and glanced toward the piano in the corner. It looked the same as always. Clean, polished, silent, but somehow it felt different now, as if the air around it had changed. It was strange how one simple song could make the whole place feel new. By the time the cafe filled up again, word had already started to spread. A few customers who had been there last night told others about the mysterious girl who had walked in from the rain and played like a master. Some didn't believe it. "A homeless pianist?" one man said with disbelief. "You must be exaggerating." The others shook their heads. "No," they said, "you should have heard her. It wasn't just good, it was powerful." Soon curiosity brought in new faces. People sat at tables near the piano, glancing at it as if expecting her to walk through the door again. Even the barista who had laughed before kept looking toward the entrance every few minutes, feeling a little guilty for how he'd acted. The afternoon passed quietly, but the woman did not return. The owner tried not to think about it too much, but each time the bell on the door rang, he found himself hoping it might be her. Later that evening, the same couple who had mocked her before came in again. They ordered coffee and the woman said, "Do you think she'll come back tonight?" Her partner shrugged. "Probably not. People like that don't stay in one place for long." Still, both of them sat near the piano just in case. As the hours went by, the cafe buzzed with talk. Every new customer seemed to have heard some version of the story. Some said she was once a music teacher who lost her job. Others said she was a runaway student from a famous music school. One person even claimed she had performed in concerts abroad before falling on hard times. Nobody really knew the truth, but everyone loved to guess. The owner listened quietly, wondering if he should have asked more about her. Maybe he could have helped somehow. There had been something in her eyes when she left, a look of pride mixed with deep sadness. He couldn't forget it. Around 7 in the evening, just as the cafe lights dimmed for the evening crowd, the door opened again. The bell rang softly. It was her. This time she wasn't as wet or tired, but her clothes were still plain and old. Her hair was brushed, though not neatly, and she carried a small bag on her shoulder. She paused at the door when she noticed everyone looking at her. The room grew quiet. The owner quickly stepped forward, smiling warmly. "You came back," he said. She nodded slowly. "I wasn't sure I should," she replied softly. "I just wanted to thank you again for the meal yesterday." "You don't have to thank me," he said. "You earned it." "Everyone's still talking about your music." A few people nearby nodded, and one customer even clapped lightly. The woman looked embarrassed. "Oh, I didn't mean to cause a scene," she said. "Would you play again?" Someone called from the back. Others joined in. "Yes, please. One more song." The woman hesitated. Her eyes flickered to the piano. She seemed unsure, almost frightened by the attention. "I don't know," she said softly. "I didn't come to perform. I just wanted to sit for a bit." "Please," the owner said kindly. "If you'd like to play, the piano's always yours." She looked at him for a moment, then gave a small nod. Slowly, she walked over to the instrument again. The customers leaned forward, eager, phones ready this time. The barista turned off the background music so the room was completely still. The woman took a deep breath and rested her fingers on the keys. This time her touch was different, more confident, more certain. The first notes rose gently, floating through the cafe like soft waves. Then came a deeper, stronger melody filled with emotion. It was peaceful yet heartbreaking, as if the music was telling a story no words could explain. People stopped sipping their coffee. One woman in the corner covered her mouth, tears forming in her eyes. Even the children who had come in with their parents sat still, wide-eyed. The music filled every inch of the cafe, touching something deep inside everyone who listened. When she finished, the silence that followed was heavy and beautiful. Then applause erupted, louder than before, lasting much longer. The woman lowered her hands and smiled shyly, looking almost surprised by their reaction. The owner approached her again. "That was beyond words," he said softly. "You have a gift," she smiled faintly. "It's just what I know," she said. "Music has always been my home. Do you have a place to stay?" he asked carefully. She looked down at her hands, then shook her head. "Not really. I stay where I can. Sometimes at a shelter, sometimes just outside the station." "It's fine. It's not fine," he said gently. "You shouldn't have to live like that." She shrugged lightly, still smiling as if to comfort him instead. "I'm used to it. Things change, life moves on. But music stays." Several customers were still gathered around, listening to their conversation. One man stepped forward and said, "You could play at events, you know. I work at a small restaurant downtown. We'd love to have live music like that." Another woman said, "You should record yourself. People would love this online." The pianist laughed softly, shaking her head. "I wouldn't even know how. I haven't touched a real piano in years until yesterday." Someone in the crowd offered to record her performance on their phone. "You don't need to do anything," they said. "Just play again and I'll share it." "The world deserves to hear you." The woman hesitated. "I don't know if I'm ready for that." The owner smiled. "Maybe you are," he said. "Sometimes the world needs to find people like you." She thought about it for a long moment, then finally nodded. "All right. One more song." This time she played something brighter, still full of emotion but lighter, almost hopeful. It was the kind of song that makes people smile without realizing it. The rhythm danced through the air, making the cafe feel alive. People tapped their feet. Some even hummed quietly along. When she finished, the entire place burst into cheers. Someone shouted, "Bravo!" Another called out, "You're amazing!" The barista, the same one who had once mocked her, came forward carrying a cup of hot chocolate. "For you," he said sheepishly. "On the house." She looked surprised but accepted it with a kind smile. Thank you, she said. As she drank, a small group of people gathered around her asking questions: where she learned, what inspired her, what she was going to do next. She answered each question politely but never spoke much about herself. She seemed shy, careful with her words. When it was finally time to close, most of the customers lingered, still talking about her performance. The woman stood, ready to leave again, but the owner stopped her. "Wait," he said. "If you don't have anywhere to go, you can come back here tomorrow. Play for the evening crowd. I can pay you something. Nothing big, but at least you'll have a meal and a place to sit." Her eyes widened slightly. "You'd really let me?" "Of course," he said. "You've given this cafe something special." She smiled, a genuine smile this time, warm and bright despite the tiredness in her face. "Thank you," she said softly. "I'll come back." She left soon after, walking into the cool night. The lights from the cafe reflected on the wet pavement, and her shadow stretched behind her as she disappeared down the street. Inside, the cafe felt quieter but warmer. The owner turned off the lights one by one, still hearing her music echoing in his head. He didn't know her story yet, or how she had ended up on the streets, but something told him this was just the beginning. By the next morning, the video one customer had recorded began to spread online. People were amazed by the mysterious woman with the old jacket and the golden hands. Comments poured in. "Who is she? This is pure talent. She plays like she's telling her life story." The cafe phone started ringing more often. Reporters, bloggers, and curious strangers all wanted to know about the girl who played for Emile. But the owner didn't tell them much. He just said, "Come tonight. Maybe she'll play again." And that evening, when she walked back into the cafe, still humble, still quiet, the crowd that waited for her was twice as big as before. The woman looked around, a little overwhelmed, not realizing that her life was about to change forever. The cafe was already half full by the time the woman arrived the next evening. The air buzzed with quiet excitement. People whispered to one another, glancing at the door every few seconds. Some had come out of curiosity, others because they had seen the video online and wanted to know if it was real. When she finally stepped inside, the room hushed instantly. She looked a little nervous, as though she hadn't expected such a crowd. Her same old jacket hung loosely around her shoulders, and her hair was tied back in a messy knot. But there was something gentle in the way she smiled at the owner when he greeted her. "You're early," he said warmly. She nodded. "I wasn't sure what time to come, so I thought it's better not to be late." He handed her a warm cup of tea. "You're right on time," he said. "Everyone's been waiting for you." She looked around and saw the faces staring at her, some smiling, some holding up phones, others just watching in silence. It made her a little uneasy. "I didn't mean to make a big deal out of this," she said softly. "You didn't," the owner replied. "Your music did." She smiled faintly, then looked toward the piano. "May I?"
"Always," he said. She walked over and sat down carefully, her fingers brushing the keys like greeting an old friend.
The room went completely quiet. Outside, the city noise seemed far away. She began to play. The melody started softly, almost whispering, and then grew stronger, more confident with each note. The music was full of emotion, joy, pain, memories, all wrapped together. Every sound she made seemed to pull at the heart of whoever was listening. People stopped recording. Many put their phones down without realizing it. The moment felt too real, too personal to be captured on a screen. The owner stood near the counter watching. He had heard her play before, but tonight it was different. There was something freer in her music, something that spoke of hope. Maybe it was because for the first time she was being heard, not just noticed, but truly heard. When she finished, the cafe erupted into applause. Some people even stood up, clapping and cheering. She looked stunned by the reaction, covering her mouth in disbelief. A woman near the front table called out, "You're amazing. What's your name?" The pianist hesitated for a moment before answering quietly, "Lena." The crowd repeated it, "Lena, Lena," as if turning it into a chant. She smiled shyly and bowed her head. After she played a few more songs, the cafe grew even more crowded. Some people had to stand near the door listening from outside. The sound of the piano spilled out into the street, where passers-by stopped to see what was happening. When she finally finished her set, the owner brought her a full dinner and a small envelope. "It's not much," he said, "but it's something." She looked confused. What's this? Your pay, he said. You worked tonight, didn't you? Her hands trembled slightly as she opened it and saw a few bills inside. You don't have to. I want to, he interrupted gently. You've earned it and more. Tears filled her eyes, but she blinked them away quickly. Thank you, she whispered. That night, after she left, people stayed behind in the cafe, still talking about her. One young man said, "That music? I felt it here," tapping his chest. Another replied, "It's not just talent. It's like she's lived 100 lives." Meanwhile, the video of her performance from the night before had begun to spread fast online. Within hours, it reached thousands of views. By morning, it was everywhere. People from all over the country were sharing it. The woman who played for a meal, they called her. Comments flooded in. She plays with her heart. Her story broke me. Someone find her, she deserves a chance. By the next evening, the cafe was completely full before she even arrived. News reporters had shown up too, standing near the counter with their cameras ready. The owner didn't know whether to be proud or nervous. When Lena walked in, the flashes from cameras made her flinch. She hadn't expected this. "What's happening?" she asked softly. The owner looked apologetic. "You've gone viral," he said. "People want to see you." "I don't understand," she murmured, staring at the crowd. "I just played," he smiled gently. "Yes, and you reminded people what real music feels like." She stood still for a moment, unsure what to do. The crowd began to cheer quietly, urging her toward the piano. She hesitated, then nodded and sat down. This time she played something new, a melody that rose and fell like waves, full of energy and color. Her music filled the cafe and spilled out onto the street again, where even more people gathered, listening through the windows. When she finished, the applause was thunderous. Cameras clicked, lights flashed, but she didn't seem to notice. She just smiled softly and whispered a thank you. Afterward, reporters tried to ask her questions, who she was, where she came from, how she learned to play, but she only said, "I used to study music. Then life got hard. Now I just play wherever I can." One reporter asked, "Do you realize millions of people have seen your video?" She looked shocked. "Millions?" she repeated softly, as if the word didn't sound real. The owner nodded. "It's true. People are moved by your story." She looked down at her hands, still trembling slightly. "I never meant to make a story," she said. "I just wanted dinner." That night, after everyone left, the owner sat with her at a quiet table. "Do you have any family?" he asked gently. She shook her head. "Not anymore. It's just me." "Then you have us," he said with a kind smile. "You don't have to be alone here." For a long time, she said nothing. Then she smiled, a small, fragile smile that carried both gratitude and sadness. "Thank you," she said softly. "You're kind." In the days that followed, her story continued to spread. People came from nearby towns just to hear her play. Some offered her money, others gifts. A few even offered to help her find a place to stay. But what touched her most wasn't the fame or the attention. It was the kindness. Strangers who once might have walked past her now smiled, talked to her, and listened to her music. Each night, when she sat at the piano, she poured everything into her playing, her pain, her hope, her memories of the life she once had. People said that when she played, it felt as if she was talking directly to their hearts. One night, after another long performance, a man approached her. He looked older, with silver hair and glasses. "I used to teach at the City Music Academy," he said softly. "Years ago, I had a student who played just like you. Her name was Lena, too. She had incredible promise." Her eyes widened. "That was me," she whispered. The man stared at her in shock. "It can't be," she nodded. "I had to leave when my mother got sick. I never finished." He looked at her for a long moment, then said, "Your talent was special then, and it's even stronger now. You shouldn't be playing in cafes. You belong on a stage." Lena smiled shyly. "Maybe one day. For now, I'm happy just being here." The teacher shook his head. "The world needs to hear you." He left her with his card and told her to call him if she ever wanted help returning to music professionally. That night, Lena walked home slowly, the small envelope of earnings clutched in her hand. She looked up at the city lights, bright, distant, but somehow comforting. For the first time in years, she felt like maybe things could change. At the cafe, the owner watched her leave from the doorway. He knew that the world was beginning to notice her, and part of him worried she might not always stay. But deep down, he also knew she deserved something more, something big, something beautiful. And somewhere on the other side of town, a young girl who had seen the video online sat at her own small keyboard, trying to copy the melody Lena had played. Maybe I can be like her one day, she whispered to herself. Lena didn't know it yet, but her music was already inspiring people she'd never met. People who saw in her story a spark of hope, a reminder that no matter how broken life becomes, something beautiful can still rise from it. The girl who once played just for a meal had now given the world a reason to listen. The days that followed felt like a dream that Lena hadn't asked for. The cafe that once sat half empty was now filled from morning till night. People lined up outside hoping to hear her play. The owner had never seen anything like it. Reporters came, music lovers came, even tourists stopped by after seeing her story online. Every evening, Lena sat at the piano and played, her fingers moving like they were telling secrets. The crowd always listened in silence, sometimes closing their eyes, sometimes crying quietly without knowing why. Her music didn't need words, it spoke straight to the heart. But as the days went on, things began to change. The cafe was no longer the quiet, cozy place it used to be. Cameras flashed constantly. Influencers came to take pictures with her. People shouted questions while she played. Some even argued over the best seat in the house. The magic of that first night began to fade under the weight of noise and attention. Lena still smiled and thanked everyone, but inside she was starting to feel uneasy. She had never wanted fame. All she'd wanted that first night was a warm meal and a chance to touch a piano again. Now her music belonged to the world, and that was both beautiful and frightening. One evening, after another long day of playing and smiling for strangers, she sat alone in the corner of the cafe, her head resting against the wall. The owner brought her a cup of tea and sat beside her. "You're tired," he said gently. She nodded. "A little. It's just a lot. I don't know how to handle all of this." He looked at her with concern. "You've become an inspiration, Lena. People love you." "I know," she said quietly, "and I'm grateful. But it's strange, isn't it? They cheer for me now, but none of them were there when I had nothing. When I played on broken keyboards and empty train stations." He sighed. "People notice only when the light shines bright enough. That's just how the world works." She smiled faintly, looking at the piano. "I used to think music was my home. Now it feels like a stage that keeps getting bigger and bigger. I'm not sure I belong on it." That same week she received a letter, official looking, with a logo she recognized. It was from the music academy she had once attended years ago, before her life fell apart. The message was short. "We've seen your performance. We would like to meet with you about a special opportunity." She read it 3 times, hardly believing it. The academy had been her dream once. She had left it when her mother became sick, promising herself she'd return one day. But she never had. She didn't even think they remembered her. When she told the owner, his eyes lit up. "That's wonderful. This could be your chance to start again." Lena looked down at her hands. "I don't know if I'm ready. I've been away for so long. I'm not who I used to be." He smiled kindly. "Maybe you're better than who you used to be." She went to the meeting a few days later. The building looked the same as she remembered. Tall, white, quiet. Inside, everything smelled of polished wood and sheet music. A woman from the faculty greeted her and led her to a room where a few people sat waiting. They asked her questions about her story, her music, her plans. They praised her for her resilience and said her videos had inspired many students. Then they made her an offer to perform at an upcoming charity concert hosted by the academy itself. It would be broadcast live, seen by thousands. Lena's hands trembled slightly as she agreed. She left the building feeling both excited and terrified. That night, she returned to the cafe and told the owner what had happened. "A charity concert," she said softly, "at the place I once thought I'd never see again." He beamed with pride. "You deserve it, Lena. The world needs to hear you." She smiled, but her eyes showed uncertainty. "I just hope I can make them feel what I feel when I play." As the concert day approached, people talked about it everywhere. Posters appeared around town with her picture, her sitting at the piano, her head bowed, eyes closed in concentration. She didn't like the attention, but she told herself it was all for the music. On the evening of the event, she stood backstage, dressed in a simple black dress the academy had given her. Her hand shook slightly. She could hear the murmur of the audience outside, hundreds of people waiting. The teacher who had recognized her at the cafe came to wish her luck. "You've already won them," he said gently. "Just play the way you always do, from the heart." She nodded, took a deep breath, and stepped onto the stage. The lights were bright, the piano shining under them. For a moment, the noise of the audience disappeared, and it was just her and the keys. She began to play. The first notes were calm and gentle, like a whisper in the dark. Then the music grew, swelling with feeling, sadness, hope, love, and pain all blending together. Every sound carried a piece of her life. The nights she had gone hungry, the days she had dreamed of music, the moment she had walked into that cafe asking only for a meal. The audience sat in complete silence, some holding their breath. Even the cameras stopped clicking. By the time she reached the last note, tears ran down her cheeks. She looked up, and for a moment there was nothing but stillness. Then came the applause, loud, long, and full of emotion. People stood, clapping, cheering her name. She smiled through her tears and bowed her head. When she walked off stage, her old teacher was waiting. He placed a hand on her shoulder and said quietly, "That wasn't just music, Lena. That was your soul speaking." The concert changed everything. Overnight, Lena became known everywhere. News channels aired her story again, calling her the miracle pianist. Invitations came from cities she'd never visited before. Concert halls, recording studios, even charities reached out asking her to perform. But with all the praise came pressure. Managers wanted to sign her. Sponsors wanted her to appear in ads. People she didn't know started giving her advice on what to wear, what to play, what to say. The world that once ignored her now wanted to control her. One evening, she returned to the cafe after a long interview. The crowd was gone. It was late, quiet again, like the first night she'd come. The owner was cleaning up. He looked up and smiled. "Haven't seen you much lately," he said. She sighed. "I miss it here," she admitted. "Everything used to be simple. I just played and people listened. Now it's all meetings and cameras and promises." He poured her a cup of tea. "You can always come back. The piano's still yours," she smiled softly. "Thank you. I might need that." She sat at the piano alone and played one song, slow, peaceful, and full of warmth. It wasn't for the cameras or the audience. It was just for herself. When she finished, she sat quietly, her fingers still resting on the keys. "You know," she said softly, "I used to think I was invisible, but maybe being unseen was easier. At least then I could just be myself." The owner looked at her kindly. "Don't lose that part of you. The world can take your name, your picture, your story, but don't let it take your heart." She smiled faintly and nodded. "I won't." That night, as she walked home, the city lights seemed softer. Fame had come suddenly, and with it new challenges. But beneath it all, she still carried the same quiet spirit that had led her to that cafe on a rainy night. Asking for nothing but a meal and a chance to play, and somewhere deep inside she knew that no matter how far she went, her music would always be the same, honest, human, and full of life. After the concert, everything in Lena's life began to change faster than she could keep up with. Her phone rang nonstop. Emails poured in with offers and invitations. Reporters wanted interviews, magazines wanted photos, and music companies offered contracts that promised to make her a global sensation. At first, it felt exciting. People who had once walked past her without a second glance now called her an inspiration. She smiled through the whirlwind, grateful and overwhelmed all at once. But deep down, something inside her felt unsettled. Each night after the noise faded, she sat alone in her small rented room, staring at the ceiling. The city outside buzzed with life, but her heart felt quiet, almost heavy. The music that once brought her peace now carried the weight of expectation. One evening, she opened a message from a local news channel asking her to appear on a live talk show. They wanted her to share her story with the nation. She hesitated, unsure if she wanted to go through it all again. The questions, the cameras, the reminders of her past. But the producer's message ended with, "Your honesty can inspire people who are struggling." That line stayed with her. She thought about all the nights she'd gone hungry, all the times she'd sat on park benches wondering what her life would become. Maybe, she thought, if her story could help someone else, it was worth telling. So she agreed. The day of the interview came. The studio was bright and cold, filled with lights and cameras. The host greeted her warmly, and soon the show began. Lena, the host said with a smile. Your story has touched millions, but many don't know what happened before that night at the cafe. Can you tell us what led you there? Lena looked down for a moment, gathering her thoughts. I wasn't always living on the streets, she began softly. I studied music at a conservatory. Piano was everything to me. But when my mother got sick, I left school to take care of her. She was all I had. The host nodded gently. That must have been difficult. Lena smiled sadly. It was, but I didn't mind. She used to sit beside me while I played. She said my music made her forget the pain for a while. When she passed away, I sold everything I had to cover the hospital bills, even my piano. The audience sat in silence. Camera zoomed in on her face, but her eyes stayed calm. For a while, she continued, I didn't play at all. I couldn't, it hurt too much. I moved from one small job to another, just trying to survive. But life kept pushing me down. I ended up with nowhere to go. The host's voice softened. And that's when you walked into the cafe? She nodded. Yes, I was hungry and tired. I didn't want money, just a meal. When I saw the piano, something inside me just woke up. I thought, maybe if I could play one song, they'd give me food. I never imagined anyone would care. The host smiled kindly. And now the whole world cares. Lena gave a quiet laugh. Yes, but I never played for fame. I just played because it was the only way I knew how to speak. When the show ended, the audience stood and clapped. Some wiped tears from their eyes. The clip went viral again, spreading her story even farther. People from different countries began writing to her. Students, single parents, musicians, telling her that her words had given them hope. But the more attention she received, the more she missed the quiet moments when music belonged only to her. A few weeks later, she decided to visit the small town where she grew up. She hadn't been there in years. The bus ride took several hours, and she spent most of it staring out the window, lost in thought. When she arrived, everything looked smaller. The streets, the houses, even the sky. Her old neighborhood was almost empty. The paint on the buildings had faded, and the bakery where she used to buy bread was now closed. She walked slowly through the familiar streets until she reached a small, rundown house. The door was still the same color, pale blue, chipped at the corners. She touched it gently, remembering the times she'd come home to the sound of her mother's laughter and the smell of warm soup. Inside, the house was quiet and dusty. She sat on the floor and closed her eyes. Memories came flooding back. Her mother sitting on the couch listening to her play. The sound of the rain on the window. The nights they spent talking about dreams and music. Tears welled up in her eyes, but they weren't just sad tears. They were full of love and gratitude. I hope you're proud of me, Mom, she whispered softly. I finally played again. She stayed there for a long time, just sitting in the silence. Then she took out a small notebook she carried everywhere. Inside were pages of melodies she'd written, tiny pieces of songs that had come to her in moments of quiet. She began writing again, this time not for fame or applause, but for her mother. Later that evening, she walked to the small park nearby. There was an old, weathered piano under a shelter, one that the town kept for anyone who wanted to play. She brushed off the dust and sat down. Her fingers rested on the keys for a moment before she began to play softly. The music was gentle and full of emotion. It spoke of love, loss, and finding one's way again. A few people passing by stopped to listen. Some recognized her and watched quietly, but no one interrupted. It felt like the most honest performance of her life. When she finished, a little boy walked up to her. That was really pretty, he said shyly. I want to play like that one day. Lena smiled warmly. You can, she said. Just keep listening to what's inside you. That's where music really lives. The boy grinned and ran back to his parents, and Lena felt something in her heart settle. She realized she didn't need big stages or bright lights to make a difference. Sometimes one honest song in a quiet park could reach farther than 1,000 shows. Over the next few months, she continued to perform, but she chose her own way. She turned down many offers that didn't feel right. Instead, she began visiting schools, shelters, and hospitals, playing for people who couldn't afford to go to concerts. Everywhere she went, she saw faces light up, children tapping their feet, elderly people smiling softly, nurses humming along. She realized that music wasn't about perfection. It was about connection. One day, after finishing a small performance at a children's hospital, a nurse handed her a drawing. It was made by one of the kids, a picture of a woman at a piano surrounded by hearts and stars. At the bottom, The child had written, "Thank you for making us smile." Lena held the paper close to her chest, her eyes filling with tears. That small drawing meant more to her than any award or headline ever could. That night, she sat by the window of her tiny apartment, looking out at the city lights. She thought about her journey, the hunger, the pain, the laughter, the music, and the people who had believed in her. She whispered quietly to herself, maybe all of this was meant to happen. Maybe I had to lose everything to remember what really matters. Her phone buzzed with new messages, but she didn't check them. Instead, she opened her notebook and wrote the title of a new song, "For Those Who Listened When No One Else Did." She smiled softly and began to write the notes. The melody came easily, warm, honest, and full of life. It was a song for everyone who had once felt invisible, for everyone who had needed just one small chance to be heard. And as she played, the sound filled the room, gentle, hopeful, and human. It was the sound of a heart healing, one note at a time. Months passed and Lena's life found a new rhythm. She no longer chased fame or worried about what the world expected. Each day she woke up early, made herself tea and played softly by the window. Sometimes she taught children from the neighborhood who couldn't afford music lessons. Other times she performed small concerts in schools, parks, and hospitals, bringing joy to places where it was often missing. People still recognized her from the viral videos, but she no longer felt the pressure to be anyone other than herself. When people came to listen, she smiled, not because they admired her, but because they shared in the music that had once saved her life. One morning, as she finished teaching a group of children, the cafe owner came to visit. He looked older now, but his smile was just as kind as the first day she met him. "It's been a while," he said warmly. "The cafe isn't the same without you." "People still ask about that night." Lena laughed softly. "That night changed everything for me. I was just hoping for a meal, remember?" He nodded. "And instead you got a miracle." "Maybe," she said. "Or maybe I just got a second chance." The owner looked thoughtful. "We're reopening the cafe next month. Bigger, brighter, but still home. I'd like you to come play again. No cameras, no reporters. Just like before." Lena hesitated for a moment, then smiled. "I'd love that." The following weeks went by quickly. When the cafe reopened, it looked different but familiar. The same piano stood near the window, polished and waiting. The night of the reopening, the room filled with regulars, new faces, and a quiet excitement that reminded Lena of how it all began. She sat at the piano and looked around. There was no spotlight, no stage. Just people sitting close together, talking softly, holding cups of coffee. It felt like home. When she started playing, the room grew still. The melody flowed like water, gentle and full of life. It wasn't the dramatic, powerful music she'd played at the concert halls. It was something softer, a sound that carried warmth and memory. As she played, she thought about the long road that had brought her there, the nights without food, the loneliness, the small acts of kindness that had kept her going. Each note felt like a thank you, to the cafe owner who had believed in her, to the people who had listened when others had laughed, and to her mother, whose love had never left her heart. When she finished, the room was silent for a moment. Then slowly people began to clap. It wasn't loud applause like before. It was gentle, heartfelt, real. Afterward, the cafe owner came to her side. "You still have that same magic," he said softly. She smiled. "It's not magic. It's just truth," he nodded. "That's why people feel it." Later that night, after everyone left, she stayed behind, playing one last song alone. The street outside was quiet and the lights cast soft reflections on the piano surface. She played for a long time, losing herself in the music. When she finally stopped, she sat in silence, feeling peaceful. The next morning, she received a letter in the mail. It was from the same music academy that had once invited her to perform. They were launching a scholarship program for underprivileged students who showed promise in music, and they wanted to name it after her. She read the letter twice, her hands trembling. At the bottom it said, "The Lena Scholarship, for those who dream, even when the world isn't listening." Tears filled her eyes. It wasn't just about her anymore. It was about every child who had ever felt unseen, every dreamer who needed one person to believe in them. When she visited the academy to thank them, she saw a group of young students practicing piano in a small room. Their laughter echoed down the hallway. She walked in quietly and listened. One of the girls noticed her and gasped, "It's you." "The lady from the videos." Lena laughed softly. "I used to be," she said. "But now I'm just a piano teacher." The girl grinned shyly. "Can you show me how to play like you?" Lena knelt beside her and guided her hands to the keys. "Play what you feel," she said. "Don't worry about right or wrong notes. Just play from your heart." The girl tried, pressing a few hesitant keys, and soon a small, uneven tune began to form. It wasn't perfect, but it was beautiful. Lena smiled. "See? That's music. It's not about perfection, it's about honesty." Over time, she started visiting the academy regularly, mentoring students who came from poor families or difficult backgrounds. She told them her story, not as a tale of fame, but as a lesson in hope. "You don't need to be rich or famous to make a difference," she'd say. "You just need to keep going even when it feels impossible." Years went by, and Lena became known not just as the pianist who stunned a cafe, but as the woman who gave others the courage to believe in themselves. She played at community centers, hospitals, and orphanages, always refusing large payments. "I already have everything I need," she'd say whenever someone offered her more money. "A piano, a place to play, and people who listen, that's enough." One day she returned to the same park where she had once played on the old public piano. It was a sunny afternoon and children were running around laughing. She sat down at the instrument. It had been painted bright blue since the last time she saw it. As she started to play, people began to gather. Some recognized her, others didn't. They just stood there listening. The wind rustled through the trees, birds sang softly, and her music blended with the sounds of life all around her. When she finished, a little girl approached and handed her a flower. "That was really pretty," she said. Lena smiled. "Thank you. Do you like music?" The girl nodded eagerly. "My mom says I should learn, but we don't have a piano." Lena thought for a moment, then took out a small card and wrote something on it. "Give this to your mom," she said kindly. "It's a number for a school where you can learn for free." The girl's eyes lit up. "Really?" "Really," Lena said. "And when you start playing, don't stop." "Promise me?" "I promise," the girl said, clutching the card. As the child ran off, Lena leaned back and watched the sunlight fall across the piano keys. She thought about how life had changed, how a single act of courage, asking to play for a meal, had opened doors she never imagined. Later that evening, as she walked home, she passed by a street musician playing violin. His case was open on the ground and a few coins sparkled inside. He looked tired, his clothes worn. She stopped and listened. The tune was rough but heartfelt. When he finished, she clapped softly and dropped some money into his case. "That was beautiful," she said. He looked up, surprised. "You really think so?" "I do," she said. "Keep playing. You never know who's listening." He smiled shyly. "Thanks, I needed that." Lena walked away, her heart full. She knew how it felt to stand where he stood, unnoticed, uncertain, but still holding on to a dream. When she reached home that night, she sat at her piano and began to play one final song for the day. It was soft and peaceful, like a lullaby to the world. As the notes faded into the air, she whispered to herself, "It all started with one meal." And in that quiet moment, she realized something. Her music had never been about the applause, the cameras, or the fame. It had always been about connection, about reminding people that beauty can be found even in broken places, and that one small act of kindness can change everything. Her journey had come full circle, from hunger to hope, from loneliness to love. And though the world would remember her as the woman who played her way from the streets to the stage, she would always remember herself as the girl who just wanted to play, not for money, not for fame, but for life itself. That night, as the moonlight touched the piano keys, Lena smiled and whispered softly, "Thank you." Then she closed her eyes, letting the last note linger in the air, warm, gentle, and forever human.